Thank you very much for a brilliant talk today. I have learned so much, and it just adds to a lot of the missing, filled in a lot of the missing gaps from my research. We know that Lagos started off, or Eko was a vassal of Benin Kingdom when was it Ashikpa was given the mandate to represent the Oba of Benin here. So Lagos became a vassal of Benin. And we know the Benin Empire extended from all the way from Onitsha to perhaps Dahomey, it's believed. So what was happening in Benin all this time when the British were coming and gradually snipping away at the kingdom? Because they were gradually eroding the power of the Benin Kingdom over time. So what was happening in Benin? I hope you would know, because being from Benin.
Thank you so much. Identified an issue about the Benin expansion imperial expansion to Lagos. There are worries, you know very well. They are said to have been migrants from Ife that settled in this part of Lagos, and from there they were conquered by the Benins, and then Benin built a war camp to continue their military expansion towards the west, Dahomey, etc. The British already knew that the Benin Empire actually was the key to expansion to the hinterland. And the first official visit was in 1862 by Richard Bolton. And that visit was not quite successful because he didn't have access to the Oba the way he wanted it. And so he returned back and wrote a book about his travels in West Africa, in which he denounced Benin as land that was barbaric, with human sacrifice and all of that. But of course, the traders cautioned him that Britain was still interested in Benin. And the Oba of Benin was very powerful. And the Oba of Benin still exerted monopoly over trade. And the only excuse they could get to overrun Benin or to invade Benin was just to sign a treaty. This didn't happen until 1892, when Galway, forced a treaty on the Oba of Benin. It was the attempt that was made by acting Consul Phillips to enforce the terms of that treaty that actually led to the crisis between Benin and Britain. I mentioned in one of my works that some European writers, even African scholars, they claim that it was the peaceful mission of Consul Phillips to Benin in January 1897 that actually led to the conflict, which led to the British punitive expedition. I said, no, I have found some information that Phillips himself had written to War Office and the Colonial Office to give him permission and resources to plan an expedition against Benin. And so, before the reply came, in December of 1896, Philip, but that was Christmas period, so movement was delayed. Philip had planned to come to Benin in January. The time Philip was coming to Benin, it's actually the period we call in Benin the Agwe festival. There's a big difference between Igwe, which is the Benin National Thanksgiving, and the Agwe festival in Benin. The Agwe, it's a period of national fasting and prayer in Benin. At that time, the Oba was not allowed to see or meet with visitors. Philip insisted. And of course, one of the war chiefs, planned to attack the party, which led to the death of some European and some African carriers. Now, immediately after that, of course, the news got to Europe and was described as the Benin Massacre of January 1896. Now, the British, they were aware that Benin was a powerful empire with a strong military system, and so did not take chances. What they did was to organize a multinational force. The commander of the Royal Navy from Cape Town, Rear Admiral Ross, was the commander of the expedition. Now, Britain also recruited soldiers from the Mediterranean Squadron, from Sierra Leone, from the West Indies, from Britain itself, including the elite force, to plan a strategic attack on Benin. And Britain also carefully planned the attack in such a way that it was three-pronged, from Uhoton to Benin, the other one from Ologbo, the other one from Sapele. Of course, once the invasion started in February 27, Benin did not anticipate that kind of strategic preparations or British way in warfare, and resistance did not last long, and Benin collapsed in February. Now, unfortunately for Benin, means of communications were very poor. Most of the Benin settlers, right from Benin land to Akure, to Ekiti, to Ijebu, to Lagos, did not have the means of communication to inform the Oba, for example, from Lagos. Now, this particular local government we call Etiosa. Etiosa is basically Benin settlers that were here, and they didn't have the communication system, to get back to the Oba that look, this area that we now call our war camp had been taken over by the British, and so to travel from Benin to Lagos at that time, it took roughly 8 to 10 days by waterways. And those who moved by foot, they didn't go straight. They had to go to Ife. From Ife, they had to relocate somewhere to move towards Ijebu. From there, they moved towards Ikorodu. And that was how they entered Lagos. That was the kind of movement. So this was difficult for the Oba, to totally understand that times have changed, that the British were already moving, making some incursions into the hinterland, and therefore could not prepare early enough to resist the British. Unfortunately, because by 1897, Benin fell. It will be difficult for most West African states to have resisted the British superior military technology and sophistication of their military systems, overpowered local resistance to colonial invasion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prof, for the historical analysis of the subject matter. And my question is...
Your name?
I'm Charles Osarowese, a PhD student at the University of Lagos. Thank you. And my question is, what are those basic factors that were responsible for the British annexation of Lagos in 1861? And to what extent those factors facilitated British imperialism and colonialism in Nigeria? Thank you.
British people took over the empire in 1914.
No, 1897.
My parents are from Benin. My grandfather was a representative from Benin in Morocco. I was born in 1935. By 1950, whenever the Oba passes, he will tell us. We will sit down the whole day and dance for him, and he will stop. Until 1950, he was still doing it underneath. The British people were here. I just want you to know that when the Oba is going, there's nobody with I don't know him. No, we know the British people, but the whole city, we start beating drum at 6 o'clock. If we go to Ibadan, we stop in the car and talk to us. We will steal our father underground. I just want to understand.
Thank you so much. Which actually were driving force for British imperialism, particularly the attack of 1851 and 1861 of Lagos. We have seen in the case of 1851, it has to do with two reasons, which I explained in the paper. First, the pretext of stopping slave trade. And second, they wanted an opportunity to actually have control over Lagos. Because Kosoko, who was Oba of Lagos, were considered the illegitimate king of Lagos, had strong monopoly over trade in Lagos, and refused the British to even trade in Lagos. So the British were concerned about him. And when he took over power, they were the ones who took Akintoye to Badagry to ensure that he was safe and protect him before they bring him back to his throne in Lagos. But incidentally, when they realized that Akintoye was pleading with the British to assist them to regain his throne, that provided an opportunity to come and attack Lagos. The first attack, which I described to the paper as the first battle, that was November 1851. It was actually lost by the British. They lost the battle. Perhaps they were ill-prepared, or the Lagos army more powerful than the invading army. But a month later, the British reinforced and, invaded Lagos or conquered Lagos or bombarded Lagos. Now, few days after that incident, on the 1st of January, the British quickly rushed a treaty with the newly Oba of Lagos that has regained his throne, King Akintoye. And it means that the British were anxious to establish Lagos as a sphere of influence. Now, what happened in 1861 was that between 1861 and 1851 was consular rule. Now, by 1861 was direct conquest and annexation, and then declaration of Lagos as a territory. By implication, Lagos became a grand colony of the British Empire for the purpose of expanding British influence and control over Lagos and its hinterland. Because Lagos, of course, also held the key to the hinterland, particularly the Yoruba land and towards other parts of Nigeria. So these were the reasons behind the bombardment and, of course, the conquest 10 years later in 1861. Thank you.
I have two things to talk about. One is the issue of Lagos colony, and the other one is the imperial economic policy. On the Lagos colony, we talked about amalgamation. I want to comment that now that you have the syllabus from the federal government, I want you to put it clear to Nigerian authors that we have only two amalgamation, because most of the books we've read in Nigeria is only mentioned that we have only one amalgamation in this country, and that is the amalgamation of 1914. So I want you to be corrected from history henceforth that the first amalgamation begins from Lagos to Southern Protectorate henceforth, because most of the books that were right from 1995 from school still date talks about 1914 amalgamation. That's my comment in that area for the next generation of students. Then the second one is about the imperial economic policy. From what you said, the British, their essence in Nigeria, especially in Lagos, is about the economic weapons to supply most of the resources we have here to Europe. And I think that thing has dwelled in us in Lagos, and Lagos has been practicing that imperial economic policy. For instance, in Lagos, most of the economic policy we have here, we have, we have influenced other states in Nigeria to also adopt such economic policy. especially in the political arena. You can see from APC was moving from Lagos, spreading across to other countries. That's another type of imperial policy. Another one is the area of the banking sector. We have most of our banking industry, the head office are based in Lagos, except for the Unity Bank, but now they are back to Lagos. They were once in Abuja. That's another type of imperial policy. And I think that imperial policy is really working. So that Lagos will have the economic dominance in this country. Thank you very much for this lecture. And I think we need to talk more about other aspects of our history in terms of culture, apart from imperial policy.
My name is James Shokunle. I want to ask a question that the word Lagos, where is it coming from? I heard that Lagos is a town in Portugal, Lagos. But did they ever invaded Lagos, or how did they came?
The book called Lago de Quran, which has been done by somebody who is there, Mr. Mami. Please stand up. He's a journalist. Everybody needs to have that book. Sometimes you walk on the street of Lagos and you see a name of this, and you're wondering what's the meaning of this name. Especially since this street is not being taught in school. He's done a fantastic work. I think he will publish it now. So he published it on his own, and now we're trying to see how we can reach it. Like I even go to schools. Because I see a lot of those names, and we're wondering, why should I be living on Mr. Whitestone Street? What does it mean? Mr. White.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yawanola, and thank you very much for this very wonderful my traveling journey. We're interested particularly about the isms in this isms, colonialism, imperialism, and understanding more of what the colonialists did and what the structure they laid down. We actually need to understand even their appetite. Like Cicero said, that if he could, was going to annex other planets. Now, my question is this, sir. The difference between colonialism and imperialism, and what were the epochs, what are the periods of these two terminologies? Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The question is very simple. I've heard all the whole story you are telling me here, but I'm from the eastern part of this country. I haven't heard anything said the eastern part of this country did this or that. Does it mean they are not part of this country?
Let me start with him. I was just trying to rush the paper, actually discussing the paper. See, the British realized that the key to the Igbo hinterland, was with the arrow. And the arrow, they were great traders. And they became very prominent, particularly in the coastal trade, as middlemen between the Igbo hinterland and Niger Delta traders. And so the British, based on intelligence reports, they realized that if they could attack Arrow, that would open an opportunity for them to move to the hinterland. And of course, from the records, historical records available, the last decade of the 19th century, the last 10 years, was serious conflict between the Igbos, the Arrow, and the British. And eventually, by 1901, they succeeded in defeating the Arrow. Once Arrow was captured, the Arrow town was captured. From there, they now moved to the hinterland of Igbo land, to establish control. It's actually discussed in the paper. What gave that opportunity to them was the Lagos factor. Because Lagos had been consolidated, they now moved from Lagos to Niger Delta, dealt with Jaja Opobo. Like I also mentioned here, in the case of Jaja Opobo, who strongly resisted the British. What did they do to him? They called him, invited him for a friendly meeting. Said, come, let us meet at the sea so we can talk. As soon as Jaja Opobo entered the boat took off. That was how we were able to get Jada. The boat took off. They kidnapped him. He said, look, at least this is one symbol of resistance to British invasion or incursion. So they removed Jada for Pope. And of course, the palm oil trade was mostly from Igbo land, through Niger Delta to the coast. So they knew that once Opobo was gone, Bonin was gone, Aro was gone, then they could move to the Igbo hinterland. That was how they were able, to move in to the Igbo land. Of course, conquer the areas, and from there continue their conquest of north. It's not that the Igbos were left out. They were actually, or they really experienced this European or British invasion.
Your name and...
Thank you very much, I'm greatly proud to be a woman I'm married today. Yeah, it's great. But one thing I'm really concerned about, my name is Adibisi Tijani. I'm a travel and tourism consultant and a scriptwriter at Creative Artist. So what I'm concerned about is that through your educational introduction and the delivery of our history, we, despite our education over the years across West Africa and some parts of the world, I'm learning some few things from what you just done. And I know many, like my friend Vaughn, also he has really drawn a lot of knowledge from the fountain of erudition you've deployed in this week. But what the tragedy is that in this country, when I was growing in Ghana, we were taught the history of our people. But now, in this country, nobody knows who the Yorubas are. In fact, there was a time when they said Lagos was a no man's land, which was very tragic, because I know, even in Ghana, we read about Lagos and the connection between Lagos and Accra. Well, in Accra, we have Lagos town, Mokola. These are Yoruba settlers from Lagos in Ghana. So that's the first thing we have, the challenge, because we are our father up there. We are on the Mount Everest of the history of Nigeria. We are just gazing you from the valley. That's your line. What can we do to move this? Because Lagos should not be destroyed by those who want us to lose our culture. Because I know that people like German and Klapu, it's Antonio Akosho, they did a lot of things to ensure that our culture is preserved. But the country called Nigeria is trying to destroy the multitude of cultural variation, because we are a combination of cultures, cultural nationalities as well. But we are made as a Wazobia. I have friends from the Anang, from the TV, and others. So what are we doing to recreate a platform for every nationality to enjoy its linguistic values? Then, another thing about the amalgamation in 1914. In fact, I wrote to Fashola with regard to this centenary. Now, Lagos has been ignored within the platform of this amalgamation effort, which you also draw your attention to that. We've been denied, the Lagos has been denied the centenary glory. So what are we, because by 1900, Lagos had 500,000 pounds in the Bank of England, which in this time should be maybe, if it was $1 trillion. Now, what are we doing to restore some of these lost glories in terms of educational advancement, in terms of technology advancement, in terms of even marine ventures? What are we doing to make Lagos work as well as from the beginning?
Because you came all the way from
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The lecturer of the day, Professor Salvo, of course, is very well known to me. My position is not that of a question, it's a comment. I want to first of all congratulate the lecturer and thank you for the very systematic way you took us through Nigerian history. It's very, very refreshing. My only worry is that I thought that the purpose of all this is not just to have a forum like this, but beyond that, to make the younger ones understand our history and in the process, ask questions. I didn't expect, even though it's okay, that we should take over this forum, take them over from these little kids who are there. Because the way Professor Salvador has put it to us, it is no longer an issue for us adults. It's now a refreshing thing for us. But for the younger ones, I would want to see them being stimulated, being prompted by either their teachers who have brought them there to ask questions, make comments, no matter how pedestrian the questions may be. We are here to accommodate it. That's why I say mine is not a question. I will not be asking questions today about Lagos and its influence on Nigeria. The history has been well made, but I want the children to be encouraged to ask questions. That's my comment.
You know a teacher when you see one. Actually, before you came, I already explained that the reason we encourage students to come around so that they will be part of this.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Professor, for raising that wonderful speech and enlightening us about Lagos State. My name is Ade Adepopowola. My question is very short. From a barrister lawyer, Barrister John Bishop, he said that Agege, Ikotun, Ogba are names from Edo Benin people. Is it true? Because if truly Benin is the one, Lagos is the other Benin Empire, are they the one that named those places, or truly those names should have been for the Aworis? Because my grandmother told me that Awori is Yoruba, and when they get to Lagos here, the white plate that they brought to Lagos sank inside water. And they said, Aworio, Aworio, Aworio. That I want to know more about it. Thank you, sir.
Talking about history in schools. The unfortunate thing about this country, Nigeria, is that we don't teach our history to the young ones. I studied in Germany for 8 years. I was there for 8 years. And I was amazed what I experienced in Germany. Right from kindergarten, they teach them their history. I'm not talking of secondary school. Right from kindergarten, they don't write it. They tell stories about heroes, great men, great women in their society. So that memory is there. Oh, these were great people that built their country for them. And as they grow older, they will teach them in writing and reading history in schools. The same thing I experienced in the US. History is taught. And the question is, why is history not taught to our children today in Nigeria? The major reason why we are fighting ourselves, we are killing ourselves, we are dying every day, we do not know ourselves. We don't know our history. We now see ourselves in this country as strangers. You see, that is why I said that as early as 1900, the elite in Lagos had started developing this national outlook. Now look, let us talk about Nigeria. Then by 1914, when the North and the South were joined together, and the British were talking differently, the same Lagos elite were talking about evolving a national character, a national identity to make us one as Nigerians. And that is why the first political party that was established in 1923 was called the Nigerian National Democratic Party, led by Abat Macaulay. Well, just last week, I got from the federal government a syllabus for the teaching of history in schools. I think JSS and SS. I'm going to the syllabus at 12 right now. and they want us to write books that will be used for teaching of history in schools. I've not had time to read the entire text, but when I got it, I said, okay, this is a good starting point, which means government has an idea of what history to teach. But the question is, which books are available to teach? So I'm sure they would have also sent copies of the syllabus to the Nigerian Historical Society, to which Professor Otote is a fellow, to begin to discuss history in our schools. The second question is about cultural preservation. And again, it's unfortunate. The American Civil War that was fought in 1860, go to America, you will see where the relics of those wars have been preserved. They are there in America. American Civil War of 1860 to 1865. When I traveled in the US, I was shocked. Some buildings have remained the way they were many years ago, centuries ago in America. Now I asked questions, they said no, it is part of their cultural preservation. Now there's something Americans are doing now. In the Washington Mall and around Washington area, they are building new museums, you know, to replicate their past, so that at least visitors can come and people cannot travel far into the American country, see the beauty of American cultural heritage. So in this country, we also need to talk about cultural preservation. These young ones don't know much about our culture. We have to preserve it. Then talk about issue of amalgamation. Of course, at the time of amalgamation, Lugard was not the first amalgamation. Lugard was not the governor. But people think that it was Lugard's idea. It was Lagos' idea. It was the success story of the amalgamation of Lagos colony with the Protectorate of Southern Nigeria in 1906 that also influenced Lugard. Lugard wrote in his proposals in 1913 to the colonial office in London for the purpose of amalgamation in 1914. So I expect that with knowledge of history, we should have in Lagos here, however it is small or big, a centenary city. Not in Abuja. Yeah. You may have in Abuja, there's nothing wrong, but Lagos must have it. It's not started from Lagos. Yeah. And then historical inquiries. The second person talked about historical inquiries. Well, as far as I'm concerned, history is interesting for all of us. We make inquiries because we want to know about the past. Yet, historians talk about the past. Many of us know about the past. But what differs is how we interpret the past and the kind of explanations that we give about the past. But one thing is certain. The past, or the events of the past, will not change. They are there. There was conquest in 1861, it was there. For the historian is to interpret the basis of that conquest. Then finally, the young lady talk about Benin names in Lagos. Let me start from the one you didn't mention. The Benin merchant, who was the Oba's representative in Lagos in the 19th century, was Oshodi, Chief Oshodi. And that is why, you know, a particular place in Lagos is named after Oshodi. Oshodi was the merchant representing the Oba of Benin. And the reason why he moved his, what I call warehouse, towards that location today, apparently because he felt that was safe on land to be able to protect their goods. And then from there, they moved them to the sea and then paddled to Benin. It was 8 days journey. Once they got to Water, then of course they continued one day to the city of Benin. He had these people. Why? He had these people as slaves who were resident there at that time. But under colonial rule, well, the place was lost. But then the name was already been given. Ogba, of course, actually in Benin, it's called Ogba in Benin. The Yorubas call it Ogba, but in Benin it's called Ogba. Was also a Benin settlement. It was not a settlement for the purpose of living here permanently. They were those people that left Benin that the Oba sent. The Oba had envoys, what we call diplomats. Today, that's a special name in Benin, I remember now. They were Oba's representatives in different parts of the empire. They were in Lagos, so the area they stayed were named after them. The same thing with Ikotum, etc. Now for their worries actually left in the Ife, not Ife. Don't make mistake. That territory called Ife, the first, if you are coming from Ondo or coming from Ibadan, let's take if you are coming from Ondo, the first place you get to is called Ife. The second location is called Ife Tedo. The third location is called Ile Ife. Now, if you are coming from Ibadan, you get to Ile Ife, you go to Ile Ife, after Ile Ife, you not get to Ife Tedo, before you not get to Ife. So their worries came from Ife. It's quite hilly, and I'm sure from the geography, they would have moved towards the Jambu land. And from there, they entered this area that we now call Lagos. They were settlers here. And from there, different settlements began, like Ebutemeta, just around here, different settlements all began. And Idumota is only. Exactly. No, that was when the Benin. That was when the Benin came later. When the Benin, Idum means quarter. Idum, that is the meaning of quarter. And like this, Etiosa was the military camp of the general. This Etiosa local government in Lagos was the war camp. Eko means war camp. Benin, because it was a warrior kingdom, Benin didn't negotiate peace at all with any state that failed to pay tribute. So they declared war. And so they had their outposts in different locations. But by the 19th century, following the collapse of Oyo and the demographic movement from Oyo, Ibadan, down southwest, a lot of Yorubas now pushed into Lagos. And so, of course, general language of Oyo was Yoruba, which was then applied to all the entire region. That's why today the language Yoruba, which is Oyo Yoruba, is now the language of all Yorubas, from Lagos to Egbaland, to Ekiti, to Ogun, to Ondo, etc. So these are the way in which it happened. But the footprints of Benin imperialism and empire building, they are still visible today in Lagos. Thank you.
Thank you very much, bro.
The Christian Missionaries, the book by Professor J.F. Ade Ajayi, Jacob Festus Ade Ajayi. He wrote, what he tried to say in that book is that the missionaries first came to Lagos in 1842. And it was 4 years after, 1846, that the missionaries moved from Lagos to enter Abeokuta in Egbaland. And then to talk about the influence of the missionaries both in Lagos and in Egbaland, and then of course in Yoruba land. That's what Ade Ajayi talked about. And the influence of this development was the building of schools. Of because the spread of the Christian religion that we now know today. Somebody asked about was Lagos the first territory in Africa or the other territories owned by the British? In the 19th century, the British established spheres of influence, particularly in East Africa. It was very strategic. In East Africa, the area that we now call Uganda. Actually, Uganda was named after the kingdom of Buganda. If you remove the B, it becomes Uganda. The kingdom was called Buganda. The people are called Baganda. So, British influence was in East Africa, in Uganda, then also in the area called Kenya. The whole of East Africa generally, then of course, the Germans, the German traders were also around the area we now call Tanganyika, which is now Tanzania. But it was called Tanganyika, but it's now called Tanzania. The British did not establish any formal control until late 19th century. Now in Benin, Gold Coast, Nigeria or Lagos, Sierra Leone, and what do you call now? Gambia. They were British colonies. The British went to Sierra Leone and established a city called Freetown. Freetown was established first as an opportunity for free slaves who desired to leave England to come out of Africa to settle, because they didn't know where they were taken from. And those that were captured in the high seas, were returned back to land. And of course, the only place they could take them to was Freetown. So that was already established as a colony before the conquest of Lagos. What was Ramafi doing during when the British invaded Lagos? In actual fact, Lagos was not part of Oyo Empire at the time of British conquest. It was part of the Benin Empire. It's obvious that, well, because of distance, you look at Oyo Empire today, you think Oyo Empire is just after Ibadan. That's not correct. Oyo Empire, the old Oyo Empire, it was located in Kwara State. Kwara State. That's what we call the northern frontiers of Yoruba land. Actually, Yorubas own the whole of Kwara, Ogi, and all that. They speak the language, the Yoruba language. They own all of that. So the old Oyo itself had its own territory. And by the way in which the empire was organized, they had a war general who was the Areyama Kakanfu, who was the military general, fighting wars all over. However, even after the conquest of Lagos, don't forget, that was the period, that Yorubas were engaged in civil wars. Not intertribal wars, Yoruba wars. By the end of the 18th century, internal political crisis that created problems for Oyo. By the 19th century, the collapse of Oyo itself triggered a series of problems because of the need to create balance of power in the struggle to fill the vacuum created by the fall of Oyo Empire. And so, all kinds of alliances in Yoruba land, the Egba, the Ekiti-Parakpo, the Owo, the Ife, Ilesha, they were all fighting. Of course, this wars did not come to an end towards the 19th century, by which time, of course, Lagos had taken over by the British. That's why the Yorubas or your empire will not mobilize forces to protect Lagos from the British. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. The next set of questions will be the final. I think so that we can watch the
questions fast. The first one is about Calabar. I was very interested in the role Calabar played in Nigerian history. I think you dwelled on it very, very briefly. Was Calabar the capital of the country, and how long was it and why was it taken back to Lagos? The second one is about the influence of the returning applicants from Cuba and Brazil. You didn't dwell much on that at all. And I'm interested in that aspect in the development of Lagos, because I think at the same time when the British was trying to establish control, they found these people amenable because they spoke the European language and they had just returned from the new one, so they were able to use them in some way to also help administer the area. So I'm interested in your thing on that.
All right. John Beecroft, who was the British consul for the Bight of Benin and Biafra, it was when he relocated, in about 1872, from Lagos to Calabar. He was concerned about expansion of the British Empire towards the Cameroon Mountains, and then up north towards Taraba in present-day Nigeria. That was his major concern. And since Lagos was now secure under the British, because it has now become a colony and part of the British Empire, he now felt that, look, the best to do that was to make Lagos, Calabar, the capital of Nigeria. Well, the history is a very short one. It was not for too long. It was less than 5 years or so where he operated for. But he was now advised that that Calabar itself had its own creeks, Ensure Town, Duke Town, and he had a peculiar problem at that particular time, which was not visible in Lagos. The Efik society with the problem of the blood men, the blood men issue in Calabar. And it was actually a threat to peace and security in that area. And so they didn't feel that Calabar was secure enough as the new capital of Nigeria. That is why it was advised to be turned back to Lagos. So Lagos was now firmly established. Secondly, to move Lagos, the capital from Lagos, will mean to relocate the government, the seat of government, the central legislature, the executive, the judiciary, to Calabar. And this was, of course, one of the great problems in terms of cost to the colonial government. The returnees, I didn't talk about it in the paper. It's there in the paper. I know Lagos did something. To some extent, some returnees were accepted in Lagos. Returnees from Brazil, returnees from the New World, even America itself, the returnees from Europe. Now, these returnees had new ideas, and most of them, their cultural habits, which they brought along with them, also began to influence people here in Lagos. The way of dressing, the shoes, and building of houses. And all of this, began to influence the style of Lagos life, the creation of an urban city. I talk about urban regional planning. It was these returnees that brought these ideas. And of course, the Europeans or the British were willing to use them to construct most of the projects that were colonial projects here in Lagos, particularly some of these prison walls. Some of them are still standing, as you can see. The returnees actually had a great deal of influence here. Since we're talking about empire and imperialism, there's a limit to which we can introduce the returnees, but they had a great influence in Lagos. Some time ago, when the building was pulled down, it's somewhere in Lagos. I read it on the internet. Oh my God, a lot of people cried. I said, why should Lagos State government allow this to happen? That it was built in the 19th century, and it's supposed to be something like a tourist center that could be preserved, But like somebody said, this is Nigeria. We have no interest in our history. Therefore, anything goes. But for us, this new generation, not everything goes. I'm sure the young ones, I'm sure I'm also answer our questions too. All right, God bless you.
Incidentally,
my name is Temidaya. I'm
I'm from USA Baptist Secondary School. My question is, what was the old Oyo Empire that Alaafin doing when the British invaded Lagos?
That is one. So there's another, you're okay?
Thank you all. My name is Becca Sylvester from Greenfield Comprehensive School. And my question is, was Lagos the first British colony in Africa? In essence, was Lagos the first place to be invaded by the British in Africa?
Make it short, you mean?
My name is Ulujobi, and I'm sure it's quite surprised why I said I should fall under the youth, because that's actually what I am. I'm a youth. A few days back, I came across a treasured possession, and that was a book written by JFA Ajayi. That's Christian missionaries in Nigeria. And I was quite surprised that we had such books. That shows how young I am. And due to my curiosity, I felt I should send an email to the professor. We were to go online and saw that he died in 2014, which was really sad. So today's presentation, you did mention the bombardment of Lagos, and Lagos was under the Benin Empire. In the same, I believe Abeokuta should be under Benin Empire also during that time. Okay, Abeokuta wasn't. Okay, then an incident happened, which was Ifole, forgive my pronunciation, Ifole was breaking of houses. Ifole. Yeah, when that incident happened, it happened after the bombardment of Lagos. Why did the Benin Empire seize on that opportunity on making an alliance with Abeokuta, if possible, to progress and regain occupied territories within their empire? That's my first question. Then my second question, you did mention 1914, which is the coming together of the Northern and Southern Protectorate. And the person who represented the British Empire said it wasn't to make Nigeria one, it was to save the cost of governance. And yet today, under the same one Nigeria, we're complaining of the cost of governance. So what now happens? What is the difference between the cost of governance then and the cost of governance now? So that's my second question. Then my third question and final question is, Lagos has played a significant role in Nigerian political history, and most of our early political parties were founded in Lagos. But why is it, and this question was generated by a friend of mine who asked me yesterday when he saw me reading the book I just earlier mentioned. Why is that with such role Lagos played in Nigeria's democracy, why is it our politics today dominated by the Northerners? I have no issue with the Northerners. I myself am a Northerner. But why is it that it's the Northerners that are dominating the political history? So what happened that Lagos lost its grip? Even though I hear here they say echo federal, but we know that you can't rule out the fact of Northern dominance. So these are my questions.
All right, thank you. For political parties in Nigeria, then of course, Nigerian political and constitutional development. Why is it that today Nigerian politics is dominated by the North? In the 1950s, the manner in which the British created the provinces gave due advantages to the North to have more members in Parliament than the South. You know, you have the North as one block, then you have the West, and of course the East. And that was how independence was to gain in 1960, which ensured that the North had more members in Parliament than the South. And eventually, Tafawa Balewa, APC, Northern Post Congress, an alliance with SNC, took over leadership. But that was not the main issue. The North, while Nigeria was busy, while Lagos, let me use Lagos, while Lagos was busy fighting for Nigerianization, let us become Nigerians, let us put this upon Nigeria, the North was carefully planning what we call Northernization policy. The North was not concerned about Nigeria as one. The North was concerned about Northernization policy of its own. And therefore, they were deliberately preparing themselves in the military, in the civil service, or whatever, to be comfortable in the North in the event of any breakup of the amalgamation between the North and the South. And when the coup started in 1966 and continued, the North began to dominate. And they're the ones that created states, they're the ones that appointed whoever they appointed, they're the ones who began to influence Nigerian politics. That is why today the Northerners believe that power is their right. And of course, it's just the population that has given them a kind of advantage, and of course, their involvement in the military. I'm just trying to summarize. The 1851 bombardment, when that bombardment took place, there was no formal political control over Lagos. Oba Adolo was the king of Benin at the time of the bombardment of Lagos in 1851. And from the information about the book I read by Richard Bolton, which was published in 1862 or 61, shows that the Oba was aware, Oba was aware of the bombardment, but that the king was not removed. So the information which got to the Oba of Benin is that, look, the Oba of Lagos is still there, the throne is still there, but that it was these European traders that just created some problems and everything was in order. That is why Benin did not go into alliance with any Yoruba group to fight the British. You also realize that the Ekpaland, of course, the immediate hinterland of Lagos is Ekpaland, which is Ogun State. Benin would have been able to enter into alliance with Ekpaland, but that area, was facing a major threat from Dahomey. Dahomey was expanding towards Oyo Empire, while Oyo Empire was also expanding towards Dahomey. And so there was this clash between the expansion of Oyo Empire into Dahomey, and Dahomey intended to expand into Ekpaland. But of course, Oyo was able to push off the Dahomey and secured Ekpaland. I'm sure Benin did not want to breach the agreement, because Benin Empire entered into agreement with Oyo to define and demarcate the territories of both empires. So Benin didn't want to interfere by asking Ekpaland to support its military attack on colonization. You said isms, and isms. Very interesting. We can talk about that when we are relaxing outside. You see, imperialism is simply a strategy to extend the influence, control, and power of a country over another territory or country. That's imperialism. Colonialism is to establish political control in terms of administration of a territory that is under the power and authority of an empire, like the British Empire. So, think about colonialism in Nigeria. The structure of colonialism you find in terms of judiciary, executive, and so on and so forth. They are there to make governance or administration work. That is colonialism. The territory has been colonized, and therefore they have to be administered. In the case of Nigeria, two policies: direct through the Lagos, indirect through in other parts of Nigeria. Somebody talk about the origin of Lagos. I'm happy that In history, there's what we call subjugation and conquest, or call it military conquest and then political control. It is difficult to say, oh, after conquest, there was the position of political control. The team line will not be too wide. Take Lagos, for example. Once Lagos was conquered in 1861, by 1862, less than a year, the Grand Colonial system has been established. A government was already appointed with executive members and with the parliament. So in some cases, it will last long. Like, take Benin, for example. Between 1897 and 1914, there was no Oba in Benin. Ralph Moore himself declared, the white man is now the king of Benin. For 17 years. Now, they had to rule, it was a direct rule, they had to rule with district officers. You know, DOs, they were the ones appointed to rule. Whereas in some other places, there was direct administration, or sorry, indirect administration through Obas or through the emirs. The origin of Lagos, of course, there's a book on it. I've not read the new book, but what I know in Portuguese language is what German already explained. It means the lagoon area. That's the meaning of Lagos. Lagoon area. If you have visited Europe or the white man's country, they like the riverside a lot. They like water a lot. And so when the British look at this part, and he said, okay, this is what the Portuguese have been calling the Lagos area, lagoon area. Okay, no problem. But in Portuguese, I think the language in Portuguese is something lagoon. Exactly. So it was the British that called it Lagos. Lagos, that name Lagos is British for lagoon area. Although the Portuguese were the one that named it. The Portuguese were the first to come to West Africa. They passed through Lagos and went straight to Benin. You know, at that time, they had not heard about the fame of Oyo Empire. Otherwise, they would have made incursion from this Lagos territory to through Yoruba land to Oyo, but they heard about Benin. That Benin was also very close to the sea, and so they moved from Lagos straight to Benin. When they got to Benin, they entered first through Warri, then later through the Gele port, the Kogoton port, you know, from where they established contacts with Yoruba Benin. Shortly after the Portuguese, the Dutch followed, the English followed, of course the Italians also followed. These were missionaries, traders, and of course travelers and visitors to this part. The issue of Lagos colony and amalgamation. I've mentioned it before. The very first step towards amalgamation of the conquered territories began with Lagos. Because Britain at that time was thinking of what to do with the southern territory already conquered. And since they have already established a colony in Lagos and a protectorate over southern Nigeria, you know, so the best to do was to do this journey together, what you might call amalgamation. So we should talk about the amalgamation of Lagos and southern Nigeria as a success story which influenced Lugard in 1913, years after, to think of also joining southern Nigeria with Lagos and northern Nigeria. We should be able to enlighten the younger ones, this generation of Nigerians, that Lagos was the first place that experienced amalgamation before the north and the south. I think that's all for now. It's unfortunate that since 1914 up to today, this country is still grappling with cost of governance. the Nigerian economy today cannot even bear the burden of the cost of governance. The reason why there is no visible development in Nigeria today is because of the cost of governance. There is no legislator on this planet Earth who earns more than a Nigerian legislator. There is none. Both national, both states, and local. I don't know who designed the Constitution and they pay for legislators. But it's a problem. And I was happy in 2015 when Buhari came to power and he was preparing the budget for 2016. They asked him about the cost of governance. He said it's not a military ruler and there's nothing they can do about it. It's a pain in his heart to see how much money goes to the National Assembly. That's one. Then look at the presidency. Look at state governments. Look at local governments. At the end, there is nothing for development. No. It's sad. This country, I've told some of my students, you see, the economy cannot carry the cost of governance. Our economy in this country cannot. It's a body. One day it will break off. It will break off. And today, look at the structural allocation of resources based on local governments. Look at Lagos with the highest, second highest population, if not the highest population in Nigeria. How many local governments are here? Look at Kano that was split into two. Split into two or combined, because before it was split, it was about 72 local governments. And that is how resources are allocated to them. You look at it, look at the north, and see how much goes to them from local governments. And look at the area. You ask yourself a simple question. Who is bearing this burden? The cost is Lagos. First and foremost, Lagos is the commercial capital of Nigeria, whether you like it or not. Money comes from Lagos, from the ports, from trade, from business, and all that, from taxes. That constitutes part of national income. Then, oil from Niger Delta. Resources from oil combined together. At the end of the month, all they do is to sit down in Abuja and share. No good roads, no good schools, no facilities, no electricity. So it is because of this cost of governance. And I'm sure one day the younger ones will sit down and think, where is our future in this country?
When the other noticed that taxes were no longer coming in from Lagos, from Oyo, and all the other kingdoms had been taken over by the British because they took over trade. And so tithes or taxes that were already coming to Benin would have stopped. Surely this would have informed him that there's something amiss. Do you know what was happening within the Benin kingdom at that time?
Yes, succession to the throne after Oba Adolo, the prince who took over as the king, who became Oba Oforome, was actually not the rightful heir to the throne. And the rightful heir, for some reasons, was maneuvered out of power. And the chiefs that opposed Oba Oforome when he came to power, he hurriedly tried them and executed them in Benin. So there was a major outcry against his administration. And while that was going on, there were revolts. Akure revolt, the Agbo revolt, even Lagos was considered, to be a revolt against the Benin Empire. And when Oba Oforome realized that taxes, tributes, payment from tolls were no longer coming, Now, for the first time, he planned a major military barracks at a village called Obada. Obada, it's in the whole local government area of Edo State. He planned to build a barracks there, very big barracks, to train soldiers. That was the first time that the Oba of Benin had the idea of a standing army. Now, this standing army was going to move to the east, to the west, to the south, to reconquer the empire. The soldiers were still in training when the British invaded Benin. So the Oba could not get to Lagos. But something happened. I read it in the colonial reports. When his son, Oba Ewaka II, became Oba in 1914, the first thing he inquired of the British was that they should allow him take over the Benin Empire, Ekiti, Akure, Ondo, and Lagos. And then the British told him, no, yourself and the others, they are now under British authority and power, that they will not allow him to take over those territories again. You see, the son still knew that those areas were there as part of the British Empire, but they had come under British imperialism and control. That was why we didn't lost that. Thank you. My teacher is here, so I'm going to give him the microphone to talk. Just a minute. Let me introduce him. Professor Leo Toidu is the Dean, Faculty of Arts, University of Benin. He flew in from Benin today for the purpose of attending this 8th colonial. He is himself a professional historian. We have known for years. When I was in secondary school, he taught me history. And he's happy that his own son that he taught history is now a professor of history. That is my father, and he's a historian. So I'll give our daddy time to respond to the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sadolo, for that very good talk and good compliments. As a matter of fact, I came in this morning by the 10 o'clock flight for the purpose of attending this colloquium, and I'm returning by tomorrow morning. I'm very, very pleased to be here. In all honesty, I would have lost a lot if I had not come here. My interaction with Professor Sadolo has been for a very long time, right from ages, as it were. And I'm very impressed that he has been able to give this lecture today. Fencing is not my only output as professor. I have about 500 or 600 persons who have gone through me, who are now professors in various universities here and outside the country. As a matter of fact, I was touched by the last speaker when he talked about history being removed from our syllabus. It is a tragedy, to put in. It's a tragedy and a complete misfortune for this country. Now, when I gave my inaugural lecture some time ago, I think it was 2 years ago, when I gave my inaugural lecture, I devoted a paragraph of that lecture to the absence of history in our schools. Because the question is this: if you do not want to know your past, it means that you have foreclosed yourself to the past, and then of course you have foreclosed yourself to the future. You must understand your past in order to understand your future. There is no logic more than that.
It does not answer to any other logic. If you destroy your past, then it is obvious that you are destroying your future. Like Benson has said, in most universities, take the United States for example, where I have also been to, not as a student, but as a participant in their lecturing. It is compulsory that whatever you read, you must know and pass the history of the United States. Many of us have been given fellowships to go to the United States for one fellowship or the other. Once you are given a fellowship and you are invited for a fellowship in the United States, the process of your preparation involves sending you materials on the history of the United States. In fact, as soon as you land, the period of orientation involves introducing you to the greatness, to the valor of the United States. They want you to know about the nation. But the case is different from us. The policy of whether we should not read history again in our university was indeed a policy that was emplaced by illiterates. With illiterates, I can still visualize very clearly looking at the television and watching a military administrator defending the idea that history should not be taught in secondary schools. I remember that very clearly. But the issue is this: have we actually, is it that we are crying over spilled milk? No. It is true that you don't cry over spilled milk. But in this case, we are trying to gather that milk and put it back into the cup. And I want to let you know that these statements you have made here have been made in the forum of the Historical Society of Nigeria. The Historical Society of Nigeria, to which I am a fellow, has taken it as its cardinal objective to see that history is restored in our schools. In one of those instances, that was when Olusegun Obasanjo was president. In one of those instances, when the Historical Society visited Obasanjo and mentioned it, it sounded strange to him, because you know very well that beyond the military or technical education, Olusegun Obasanjo is a traditional man. He is one who rests on traditional knowledge. Whether you want to accept it or not, he has native intelligence. Yeah. And that native intelligence can only be acquired from a sense of history. And he was baffled, he was startled. Then, this other lady, the lady who is now, participates in Bring Back Our Girls. What's the name? Yes, right. Was the Minister for Education. He immediately summoned her in the presence of members of the Historical Society to ask her, is this true that history is no longer in the syllabus? And instructed her that make sure that history returns to the syllabus. But unfortunately, that was the tail end of his administration. And so, that drive which Obasanjo tried to give was not carried through. But I want to let you know that the Historical Society of Nigeria has not relented. In fact, What Benson was telling you now is actually the outcome of the efforts of the Historical Society of Nigeria. There was a program, a national program on television some time ago, in which Professor Osadolo featured, and the president of the Historical Society also featured, talking about history in our schools. I want to believe, because a lot of things have happened since then, that this matter has now gone beyond mere talk. It has actually gone to the level where efforts are actually being made now to restore history to the syllabus. And the administration, the federal government, has taken positive steps in that direction. If you are talking of a pressure group, I want to assure you that the Historical Society of Nigeria is a sufficient pressure group. But that is not to say that if you have the opportunity wherever you are, you should also lend effort to the present action that's been undertaken by the Historical Society of Nigeria. I want to let you know that this colloquium is a heart-rending one. I missed the one of last year, and I'm intrigued by the fact that you've been talking about this, and the lecture you talked about for last year is also very instructive. And I'm happy that we have somebody of the caliber of Professor Osadolo, whom we respect a lot. We don't just respect him because he's an historian. We respect him because he's very articulate. He's very intelligent. If you ask me, the top 5 students or 10 students that have gone through me, I will readily tell you that Professor Osadolo is one of them. He is very intelligent, and when I came in and I saw he was already gesticulating, I asked myself, I said, I hope these people know that there's going to be dinner, because if you are not careful, Osadolo will talk through lunch, through dinner, and we will not be anywhere. So I want to thank you very much, Professor Osadolo, for that very brilliant effort. And I will thank the organizers of this function that you are quite on track. I'm pleased to be with you, and I wish you God's blessings. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank the speaker of today's paper. I want to thank you very much for exposing us once again to the true historical perspective of Lagos. What you have just given us has gone to reinforce the paper presented by Chief Asemota at the 6th colloquium, where the topic was Lagos, the Southern Lady of Mins, the original Southern Lady of Mins, in which he exposed us to the fact that the so-called revenue generation in Lagos started with the Lagos ports, and all the other developments, the money that was accruing from the Lagos ports and Lagos were being used to develop the first set of infrastructures in Nigeria. So thank you very much, sir. And I want to thank you most especially because you have given us the truth of what transpired between Lagos and our people, the king at that time, and of course the British, and our colonial masters. Thank you very much, sir. And to use the language of your last institution, I will say, end is good, all is good. It is well, all that ends well. Thank you. Across to the professor about the abolition of history in the curriculum, in the school curriculum. Sir, it is a sabotage, a sacrilege. And I think it was done by people that are misinformed and probably they don't have history of their past. They shouldn't allow them to, they shouldn't allow that to affect us here. Because I was a student of history. I appreciate it right from Form 1 when my father bought me a book called The Way of World History, where I read from the Stone Age to Industrial Revolution and of course to what you have exposed today. In that book, I remember I read a portion before the Renaissance or Age of Discovery. There used to be, they called the movement of the barbarians in Europe. In that book, which involved a lot of bloodshed. These same barbarians today are those we call our colonial masters. Yes or no? You know, things like this. An Italiano will say accidente, that is very, very unfortunate. And we have been civilized, and we have never been recorded to be called barbarians, not in the history. We should be proud. I thank God that I went through all this history. I was one of the unfortunate students that didn't get university here, and I decided not to go to London to read, but to go to a place that I did not even understand their language in the first place, which is Italy. I settled in Florence. I went to school in Pisa, La Città della Torre Pendente, the city of the Leaning Tower. You see, I gained a lot historically. What I have learned, even in Nigeria, I now see them face to face in structure, in written materials, and all those things. When I came back here, and I was told that history has been abolished from school curriculum, I don't know, I wept. I was sad. And I now find out that it affected my children. They don't know anything about the history of their environment, of their city, of where they live. They don't know their past. They don't know that we were never barbarians. We have been civilized people from ages. So, sir, that's where I'm going. What do we do to reinstate history in our curriculum? Sir, I have an advisor, and that is where we end this talk. There is need to raise a pressure group. What is bad, sir. Abolition of history in our school curriculum is bad, and it's a setback. It's a real setback. We should fight for the reinstatement. And I believe the reinstatement, the pressure group must come. Because first, I thought when they abolished history, all the history professors and students have been banished to outside, or they've gone to other places that are civilized to teach history. But seeing you here, seated here, sir, I'm encouraged to ask to make this statement, that that pressure group must be led by the academia and the intellectuals, especially professors of history. We must fight for the reinstatement of history as a subject in our institution. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Whether it is Western Europe or Eastern Europe, which is the country that is most developed? It's the question. Which country is most developed? Whether Eastern Europe or Western Europe? Yes? Germany. You are sure? Western Europe, Eastern Europe. Which country is most developed?
Western Europe.
Which country? Huh? No. The kind of houses you see in Britain, England, you don't see them in Germany. The German Autobahn, the road they have is the best in the world with this network. Now, I want to tell you something about Germany. In spite of their economic power, science and technological advancement, don't joke with history. I was not told. You know, in German schools, they have seminars like this. I was the only black man that was in the seminar for history. The rest are whites. And some of the students who sat by my side, one of them was studying a textbook on biology. I said, you are studying biology. What are we to do with African history? She looked at me. I said, I said, yes. You're asking me this question? In Germany, you can confirm, it is compulsory that if you want to be a teacher in Germany, whether teacher of biology, chemistry, mathematics, physics, English, anything, it's compulsory you must study history. One, it's not just history. First you study German history, European history, and then the history of other peoples of the world. So whether American, African, or Asian, it is compulsory for them. I said, he said, because they will be teaching in class, and their students will ask questions about the history of the world, of other peoples. They should be in a position to answer. That is Germany. As advanced as Germany, they still value their history and the history of other peoples. Why can't we do the same? God bless you.
Thank you very much.